Welcome to Finding Holiness, where we delve into timeless Torah wisdom, revealing the sacred in everyday moments. Join us on a journey to elevate your spirituality and discover holiness in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Rabbi David Kadosh, and together, let's embark on a path of spiritual exploration. I hope you enjoy this next episode. Good evening, Erev Tov. Welcome everybody to another installment of our Megilat Esther series as we continue our journey in learning the text inside Al Pi Peshat as we started last week. I'm happy you can join us this evening live here or, of course, on our podcast at findingholiness.com, where you can catch all of our previous shiurim recordings and this series and many, many others. So if you're joining us tonight for the second part of this series, then by all means, happy you can join us. But don't forget to go and listen to part one. You can catch that on our website. The Megilat Esther series is sponsored Le'ilui Nishmat Alegria Batrika Zichrona Livracha by her loving grandchildren. May the words of Torah, the Hidushim that we say, the lessons that we learn, bring an aliyah to her neshama. Tihi nafshat tzerura bitzor ha'chayim. As I did last week, I want to encourage everybody that is listening to have a chumash with them. It's good to follow along inside, see the text inside, get a feel for the words, and it means a lot more when you see what I'm referring to in the text. Of course, if you're using a chumash, if it's a chamisha chumshei Torah, you can probably find the Megillah either at the end of the chumash or after Sefer Shemot. We studied last week the first chapter of the Megillah, and today we are going to study the second chapter of the Megillah. We do have plans to divide the Megillah into 6 parts, so Bezrat Hashem, starting next week, we'll start combining some chapters in order to reach our destination at the time that we hope, the date that we hope. So today we're going to be studying the second chapter. In the first chapter, we spoke about Vashti's what either was a death according to Rashi or execution being that of her refusal to join Ahasuerus' party, or it was just that he just sent her away and she was no longer permitted to see Ahasuerus. And tonight, in the second chapter, the theme is searching for a new queen. That's a king cannot be without without a wife, without Ezer Kenegdo, and hence Ahasuerus is going to begin the process of searching for a queen to replace Vashti. And it's with that we begin with Perek Bet Pasuk Aleph. Pasuk tells us, Ahar hadevarim ha'ele. After these things, Keshoch hamat hamelech Ahasuerus, when the anger, when the wrath of the king Ahasuerus subsided, Zachar et Vashti ve'et asher asata. He remembered Vashti and what she had done, ve'et asher nigzar aleha, and what had been decreed against her. So, ahara devarim ha'ele, sometime after this, when all the guests were gone and the party was over, and Ahasuerus remained alone, it's that time when you remain alone where you start to think and you introspect, and sometimes you ask yourself, what did I just do? And this is what Ahasuerus was going through at this time. The effects of the wine wore off, according to the Al-Sheikh, and now he's level-headed, and he's contemplating, what did I do? Did I do something that was right or not? But it's too late now because it was decreed, it was stamped, it was sealed in the book, and Vashti is gone. So therefore, Zacharet Vashti, he thought of Vashti, and he remembered how beautiful she was and how wonderful queen she was, and the fact that she came from a very, very important lineage, and how noble her birth was. And these are things that were on the mind of Ahasuerus, and everything that she did. And he realized that maybe rather than punishing her for refusing the bizarre demand that he laid on her, maybe he should have been grateful to her. Some want to say that Ahasuerus was now in the process of thinking to marrying another woman, that maybe I shouldn't marry someone like Vashti, somebody such a high-born woman, a woman with such lineage, because maybe she's going to rebel against me as well. And if that's the case, I'm going to have to employ a very drastic punishment a second time, which would be a move that is clearly unwise, and hence it's something that he thought. What did she do? I don't want to go through that experience again. And as well, what was decreed? Now, asher nigzar aleha is a passive voice. It's a passive tense. It didn't say asher hu gazar aleha, that he decreed against her. It's what was decreed on her. Because the truth is, it was the other people who decreed Vashti's death or excommunication. It was not him. Achashverosh blamed his ministers that for persuading him to execute Vashti while he was drunk. And according to the Targum Sheni, one of the main commentaries on Megilat Esther, he had those 7 ministers executed, which is why the next consultation, the next advice that he gets is not from the Sarisim, or it's now from the Ne'arim, the Na'arei HaMelech. So he executed those people out. You give me this bad advice? How can that be? Some want to say that the passive tense over here at Asher Nigzar Aleha hints that Vashti's execution was engineered by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what was decreed from above. Hashem needed her to die in order to eliminate all the descendants of Nebuchadnezzar, who was the destroyer of Hashem's Bet HaMikdash, Hashem's temple. Or we can say this was a direct punishment to Vashti for forcing the Jewish women to work on Shabbat, as we mentioned briefly last week, and is also quoted in Masechet Megillah, the Yud Bet Amud Bet. Okay, moving on to Pasuk Bet. Vayomru na'arei hamelech mesharetav. And then you see here, now all of a sudden it's the na'arei, it's the attendants. It's no longer those first ministers that were there, because they were executed. Vayomru na'arei hamelech mesharetav. The king's attendants told him, Yevakshu lamelech ne'arot betulot tovot mar'eh. I got an idea. Let the king search out betulot tovot, young maidens, young virgins of beautiful appearance. This is what they said. After Ahasuerus revealed all of his concerns to them and all the things that were bogging down his mind, he said, "This is the advice that they came up with. V'yafked hamelech pekidim bechol medinot malchuto. Let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces. Ve'ikbetzu et kol na'ara betula. That they gather every young maiden, tovat mar'eh, of beautiful appearance, el Shushan habira, to Shushan the capital, el bet hanashim, to the harem, that's the house of women, el yad hege, seris hamelech shomer hanashim, under the charge of Hege or Haggai, who was the king's chamberlain, shomer hanashim, who protected the women. Venaton tamru kehen, and let cosmetics be given to them. All right, so we see here, Venaton tamru kehen, every one of these women who are going to be gathered, were going to be supplied with cosmetics. And the idea here was that he wanted to treat them all the same. Every woman was going to get the same treatment, the same creams, the same oils, the same perfume, the same makeup, the same hairdo. Everything was going to be the same. And he wanted to be able to judge who was the most beautiful. For Ahasuerus, it was all about the physicality. That's what it was. I want to choose the most beautiful woman of the group. And this was the advice that was given to him by the attendants. Pasuk Dalet. Ve'ana'ara. And then the girl, Asher titav b'nei hamelech, who pleases the king, Timloch tachat Vashti. She will reign in place of Vashti. Vayitav hadavar be'enei hamelech vayasken. So the matter pleased the king, and he did so. So notice how the pasuk begins v'ana'ara, the girl. All of a sudden, it's not about lineage. It's just about the girl who he chose to be the queen, and that's who was going to be the queen simply by being married to him. No longer is it the other way around where Ahasuerus may be king because he married into a royal family. Not so. Now I'm the king. Vashti is no longer in the picture, and the queen, the woman that I'm going to marry, is going to be the queen because she is married to me. Okay. Pasuk Hey, one of the most famous Pesukim in the Megillah. Ish Yehudi, this is the Pasuk that we all recite together in Bet Knesset. Ish Yehudi Haya Beshushan Habira. There was a Yehudi man, a Jewish man, in Shushan, the capital, Ushmo Mordechai, and his name was Mordechai. Ben Yair, who was the son of Yair, Ben Shimei, son of Shimei, Ben Kish, who was the son of Kish, Ish Yamini, a man from Binyamin. Okay. So first of all, we have this concept of Shushan Habira, where the Ish Yehudi, where Mordechai was in Shushan Habira, the capital Shushan. It's just a little bit of history here. Nebuchadnezzar exiled the Jewish people and brought them to Babylon. That's why it's called Galut Babel. Nebuchadnezzar was the chief of the Babylon army. But when Babylon was conquered by the Persians and the Medes, Mordechai HaYehudi and Daniel, along with much of the Jewish population at the time, they moved to Shushan. And that's why a lot of the Jews, or what's happening taking place, is taking place in Shushan Habira. This is the opinion of the Targum. Others want to say, the Al-Shikh writes, that Mordechai was the only Jew that was allowed to reside in the capital of Shushan, Shushan Habira. And the reason is because of his esteemed lineage, that he came all the way from Shaul, which we're going to talk about soon. But the rest of the Jews, they lived in a nearby city, also called Shushan, but it just wasn't Shushan Habira. That's why this pasuk tells us that Mordechai was in Shushan Habira, where we've already, talked about Shushan being the Habira. We've also already mentioned Shushan being the capital. Why repeat it here again? To say because only Mordechai was the only Jew to reside in the capital of Shushan, while everybody else was in a different place called Shushan, but not the capital. Now, the term Yehudi has a lot of connotations to it. Normally, whenever you see Yehudi, it's referred specifically to someone from the tribe of Yehuda. When the kingdom of Judea was destroyed, the Gentiles began to refer to all of those who were exiled as Judeans, Yehudim. That's what Rashi says. And that's where we get our modern day term as Jew. That's why we're called Jew, because we came from Judea. Others want to say that Yehudi is a descriptive adjective to describe Mordechai's piety and humility, from the lashon of hodaya, from the form of acknowledgement. Mordechai knew what his purpose was. We know that Yehuda comes from Leah, who called him Yehuda as Apam Odet Hashem. I'm thanking Hashem. I'm acknowledging the miracle that I have now of 4 children. That's what Leah said about her son Yehuda. And Mordechai was as well as an Ish Yehudi. He was labeled Ish, Ish as a man, just like Moshe Rabbeinu was labeled Ish. Ish Moshe Anav Meod. We spoke briefly last week that Mordechai and Moshe, or Moshe and Mordechai, were each the greats in their generation. So Moshe in his generation, Mordechai was equal to him in his generation. So we see this idea. He was the son of Yair, who was the son of Shimei. Now Shimei is found somewhere else in Tanakh. According to Targum, this is the famous, or infamous, I should say, Shimei ben Gera. Shimei ben Gera was the man who cursed David HaMelech, cursed King David, but he was spared execution. And the reason why he wasn't killed on the spot, you usually curse a king and throw stuff at him, you're going to get killed. The reason why he didn't do so is because David foresaw prophetically that Mordechai and Esther were going to descend from him. So he didn't kill him at that spot. He waited for him to have children. After Shimei fathered his family, then David HaMelech, before his death, left instructions for his son Shlomo to have him executed, and which Shlomo came through on his word. And that's what he did. So that's the Shimei that is being referred to in this pasuk. Shimei ben Kish, who is the son of Kish. Now the Ibn Ezra says it's probably unlikely that this Kish is the father of Shaul. Shaul is also Shaul ben Kish. He says it's unlikely because if it was really the same Kish, then the scripture, the Megillah, would have noted that it would have mentioned Shaul's name somewhere, being that he was Melech Israel. So the Ibn Ezra says that it's probably not the same Kish. However, others want to say that enlisting Mordechai's genealogy all the way up, the Targum Shani actually traces his lineage directly from King Shaul all the way back up to Yaakov. So maybe this is actually Kish, the father of Shaul. And we do know that it was Ish Yemini. Shaul did come from the tribe of Binyamin, Mordechai did come from the tribe of Binyamin, which Shaul also did as well. So it does make sense that it could be the father of Shaul. Pasuk Vav, Asher Hogla Mirushalayim, who had been exiled from Jerusalem. So this is in reference to Mordechai. Im Hagola Asher Hogleta, along with the exiles who had been exiled. Im Yechonia Melech Yehuda, with Yechonia, the king of Judah. Asher Hegla Nebuchadnezzar Melech Babel, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. So now the truth is the whole nation was exiled, yet the pasuk says that more Ish Yehudi Asher Hogla Mirushalayim. That he himself, he is singled out here as being the one exiled, because Chachamim tell us that Mordechai continuously felt pain and anguish over the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And that in alone was the reason that pointed out a lot of people probably forgot about it after a few years. Okay, life moves on. Mordechai was in constant pain and despair, the fact that there was no Beit HaMikdash, and therefore he's pointed out, Asher Hogla Mirushalayim, he's the one that was exiled, even though everybody was exiled, but we're making a point to mention him. Moving on to Pasuk Zayin. Vayhi Omen et Hadassah. He had reared Hadassah. He Esther Batodo, who she is Esther, her uncle's daughter, his uncle's daughter. In other words, cousin. Ki en la av va'em, for she had neither a father or a mother. Ve'ana'ara yefat to'ar ve'tovat mar'eh. This maiden was finely featured and beautiful of appearance. Uvmot avia ve'ima lekacha Mordechai lo lebat. And when her father and mother had died, Mordechai adopted her as his daughter. Unfortunately, Esther's parents died. Mom died during childbirth. Father died shortly before that. This was his cousin. So let's speak about the name of Esther. The pasuk mentions two names, Hadassah and Esther. Big machloket in the Gemara which indeed was the real name and which one was, I guess, the nickname. According to Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, he writes in the Gemara that her name was Esther. That was her real name. So why is she called Hadassah? Because the righteous ladies are compared to the sweet smell of myrtle. That's what Hadass is, the myrtle leaves, Hadassim, and therefore that's why she was called Hadassah. But really her name was Esther. Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai says her name was Hadassah. Why was she called Esther? Because she concealed, she hid her words. because we're going to see that later on in this parak that Esther would not divulge her nationality. She kept that to herself. That's why she was called Esther. Rabbi Nehemiah writes her name was Hadassah. Okay, why was she called Esther? She said that the Goyim gave her this name, the name Istehar. Istehar, in honor of the name of Istehar, which is Venus. Venus is one of the planets, the morning star. Some say that Istehar also means as beautiful as the moon. So that was the name that the Goyim wanted to give her, Esther. But really her name was Hadassah. Ben Azai says that Esther was neither too tall or too short, but she was medium height like a myrtle. That was why she was called Hadassah. And lastly, Rabbi Yoshua ben Korha writes that Esther had a greenish complexion. A lot of us remember this, learning it when we were young, which was the color of a myrtle. But there was this hut shel chesed, a thread of loving kindness that descended upon her from above that made her appear beautiful to all those that saw her. So not necessarily was she ugly. I think a lot of people interpret this to mean that Esther was an ugly girl. Not so whatsoever. But she had a complexion that was different. But although it was different, when people looked at her, there was a grace. There was a certain amount of like a chut shel chesed that made people really, really love her. And he took her lo lebat. He took her as a daughter. The Gemara tells us here, don't take the word bat literally, but should be read as bait. Atika lebat ela lebait, which means for her home. He took her as a wife. Mordechai married Esther. One is allowed to marry his cousin, and he married Esther. Moving on to pasuk chet, vahi, and it was Bishama devar hamelech vedato, when the king's bidding and decree was announced. Ubikabetz ne'arot rabot Shushan habira liad Hegai, and when many young maidens were being brought to the Shushan, the capital, under the charge of Hegai, but tilakach Esther bet hamelech, Esther was taken to the king's palace, liad Hegai shomer hanashim, under the charge of Hegai, guardian of the women. The word vatilakach is that she was taken against her will. That's what the Targum and the Malbim, despite Mordechai's attempts to keep her hidden, as much as he tried, she was taken against her will. Pasuk tet, vatitav hana'ara be'enav vatisaches lefanav. The girl was pleasing in his eyes. Vatisaches lefanav, and she found favor before him. This is to Hegai. Vayvahel letamrukea vetmanotea latetla. And he hurriedly prepared her cosmetics and her allowance of delicacies to present her. Ve'sheva ne'arot, along with 7 attendants, hareuyot latet la mi bet hamelech, from the king's palace. Vayshanea ve'et na'arotea, and he transferred her and the maidens letov bet hanashim, to the best quarters in the harem. Okay, so these 7 servant girls that were given to Esther, each candidate, according to Rashi, was granted with 7 maidens to beautify them. But the Gra and the Malbim want to say differently. They say that these 7 girls were given specifically to the queen. These were the same 7 that would attend to the queen. Hegai was so certain that Esther would be chosen, he didn't even want to wait. Here are your 7. We know you're going to win. Here they are. Pasuk Yud. Lo higida Esther. Esther did not tell et amma ve'et molata, of her people or where she was born. Ki Mordechai tziva aleha asher lo tagid. For Mordechai instructed her not to tell. He hoped that they would just assume, from the fact that she's not saying anything, that she was of a low birth, that she was of a lineage considered low class, and they're just going to release her. The Ibn Ezra writes that as long as no one knew that she was Jewish, she can continue to perform mitzvot. She can observe the commandments without anybody telling her otherwise. The Gra wants to say that that Mordechai wanted to protect the Jewish people from potential backlash. Should for whatever reason Achashverosh become angry with Esther, like he did with Vashti, who's he going to take it out on? He's going to take it out on Jews. So therefore, just don't tell anybody where you're from. Don't tell anybody your nation. Uvchol yom vayom Mordechai bitalech. Day after day, Mordechai would walk lifnei chatzar bet hanashim, in front of the courtyard of the harem, ladat et shalom Esther, uma yaseh ba, to learn about Esther's well-being and what would become of her. Ladat et shalom Esther uma yaseh ba. Mordechai had already figured out or surmised that if Hashem allowed Esther to suffer such a fate, to be taken into the house of the king, then she must have a mission to accomplish. It must be that she's there for a purpose, which is another reason why you didn't want her to reveal her nationality, because you don't want her to lose access to the king prematurely if the Jewish people need her to intercede on their behalf. And hence, he was constantly making sure that she was sticking with the plan. Pasuk Yudbet, Uvhagia Tor Na'ara ve'Na'ara Lavo el HaMelech Hashverosh. Now, when each maiden's turn arrived to come to the king, Miketz Heyot La Kedat Hanashim 12 Chodesh, after having been treated according to the law prescribed for women for 12 months, Ki ken yimleu yemei merukehen, for that was the length of the anointing, Shisha Chodashim Shemen Amor, 6 months with the oil of the mirth, V'shisha Chodashim Besamim, 6 months with perfumes and Tamrukei Nashim and cosmetics. According to the Gemara, this oil of mirth had the ability to remove body hair, and also beautified and made the skin shine. Hence, that's why they were given this Shemen Hamor. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Ubazeh Hana'ara ba'a el HaMelech. And when the girl came in this manner to the king, Et kol asher tomar yinaten la lavo ima, she was given whatever she requested to accompany her. Mi bet hanashim al bet HaMelech, from the harem to the king's palace. Any form of entertainment, you wanted music, you wanted people playing the flute, you wanted food, whatever you wanted was given to her as she went from the Bet HaNashim to the Bet HaMelech. Some say she would receive whatever gifts she asked for to show that she was going to the king on her own volition, in exchange for these gifts, says the Malbim. Pasuk Yudalid. Ba'erev hi ba'a uvaboker hi shava. In the evening she would come, in the morning she would return. El bet hanashim sheni. She would turn to the second harem. This is a second lady house. El yad sha'ashgaz. Seris hamelech shomer pilakshim. Now, who's in charge of this one? Sha'ashgaz. He was the guardian of the concubines. Lo tavo od el hamelech. She would never again come to the king unless the king desired and she was called by name. Pasuk Ted Vav. Vatehi uvagia tor Esther bat Abihail. So now, here we go. The moment we've all been waiting for. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, Dod Mordechai, who was the uncle of Mordechai, Asher lakach Lo lebat lavo el HaMelech, who adopted her as his daughter, to come to the king. Lo biksha davar. She requested nothing. I want food. I want music. I just gonna get over with this, and that's it. Ki met asher yomar Hagai seris HaMelech shomer hanashim. Except that which Hagai, the king's chamberlain, guardian of the women, wanted, but Tehi Esther noset chen b'nei kol ro'eh. Yet at the same time, Esther would find favor to all that saw her. So she didn't ask for anything, and in this way, she was demonstrating that she was being taken against her will. Right? Again, Achashverosh's plans that let people ask for whatever they want, so that they're coming on their own will. Their own reason, their own desire. No, Esther wants nothing to do with that. That's I'm being taken here against my will. But at the same time, she found favor. And although Esther's complexion, like we said, had turned green out of some even argue that it was green out of mortification, out of nerves. That even though this took place, I don't know what's laying ahead, uncertain future, and she starts changing colors. Her face goes green, goes white. She's worried. Nevertheless, she miraculously enchanted everybody who saw her. So it's a great miracle that takes place, especially Ahasuerus. And yet again, Pasuk Tezayin, Vatilakach Esther el Hamelech Ahasuerus ebed machuto. Esther was taken to the king Ahasuerus to his royal palace. B'chodesh ha'asiri hu chodesh Tevet, in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevet. Bishnat Sheva lemalchuto, in the 7th year of his reign. Again, so Esther was taken against her will. Vatilakach Esther, the 10th month, the month of Tevet. Interesting, the month of Tevet falls around December, January. It begins right smack in the middle of Hanukkah, so December, January time. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu arranged it for her turn to come up during the winter months when one's body takes comfort in the warmth of another. And therefore, Ahasuerus would feel more secure with Esther there in the middle of the winter. The winter nights are also longer, which allows more time for Ahasuerus to become enchanted with Esther, according to the Vilna Gaon. Notice here that it says the 10th month, which is the month of Tevet. It's actually the first time we see the name of the months show up anywhere. The names of the months that we know, Tishrei, Heshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, so on and so forth. These names of the months are of Babylonian origin. They are not Jewish origin. Jewish months are only known by their number. The 10th month. In the Torah, you only find B'chodesh Harishon, on the first month, B'had LaChodesh, right? On the first month and the first day, Nisan, the first day. That's what it was. We know them to be Nisan because this is the names that the Babylonians gave. So, being that already these names were being spread around, this is why all of a sudden we see here that the 10th month is the month of Tevet. Tevet would be month number 12, month number 10 if you begin from the Chodesh Nisan, which in general, when we study the Tanakh scripture, the first month is the month of Nisan, not the month of Tishri. In the 7th year of his reign. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that the story of Purim took over a few weeks. Not true. Vashti was executed in year 3 of Ahasuerus' reign. Esther managed to avoid detection for another 3 years. In the 6th year, she was taken to the Bet HaNashim, to the harem, where she spent 12 months, like we learned in the previous Pasuk, in Pasuk Yubet. She spent 12 months in beauty treatment before being brought to the king in the 7th year. It took 7 years from the beginning of this Megillah to where we are right now. And this is when she's finally there. Pasuk Yuzay. The king loved Esther mikol hanashim, more than all the other women. And she found more favor and kindness before him than all the other maidens. Vayasem keten malchut perosha, so that he set a royal crown upon her, vayamlichea tachat Vashti, and made her queen in place of Vashti. Rashi infers from this pasuk that not only that were the virgins, the betulot, taken, but even married women were taken by Ahasuerus as well. That's what the meaning is. Mikol hanashim, from all the other women. It wasn't just the betulot. He tried everybody. Some want to say the Mikol hanashim refers to those who had already been with the king, and the betulot refers to those who were waiting their turn, and that's the double lashon. The king loved Esther more than all the other women that he's already been with. And with regards to the betulot, the virgins, those are still waiting their turn. Still, he can see right now that she was going to outshine them. So what did he do? Vayasem keter malchut. Ahasuerus didn't even bother inspecting the other ones. He couldn't imagine finding anyone more pleasing and more beautiful than Esther. Moving on to Pasuk Yudchet. Vayas HaMelech Mishte Gadol Lekol Sarav Avadav. The king made a great banquet for all of his officers and his servants. And Mishte Esther, it was Esther's banquet. Vanachala Medinot Asa, and he proclaimed an amnesty for the provinces, lowering the taxes. That's what we all want. Vayiten Mas'et Kiyad HaMelech. And he gave gifts worthy of the king's hand. This was a great feast. Although it was less magnificent than the feast discussed in the first chapter, but to Ahasuerus there was greater importance. This was like his marriage. This was his hatuna and his new wife that he loved so much, and he wanted to display. He made the feast very, very large, and it was very, very important to him. And he lowered taxes and he distributed gifts, and he did so in Esther's honor. And the reason, says Rashi, was to lure her into revealing where she came from. If Ahasuerus knew who her fellow countrymen were, wouldn't he treat them with greater generosity, says the Malbim? So therefore, let's lower the taxes. Maybe Esther is going to finally tell us where she comes from. But Esther claimed, I'm an orphan. I don't even know who my parents are. How can I tell you where I come from? She didn't know who her people were. So the Siftei Chachamim, asks a question. There must have been some people that knew that Esther was a Jew, and she came from Shevet Binyamin. You would think there would be some Jews that would want to reveal her origins and where she came from. But the truth is, says Siftei Chachamim, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered because every nation was ready to claim her as one of their own. Everybody wants to be related to the queen. So they'll lie. They'll lie if they have to. Right? Especially when the queen is saying, I don't know where I come from. I don't know where I come from. Everybody's going, yeah, you come from me, you come from me, you come from me, you're related to me, you're related to my grandfather, so on and so forth. Because they want to be attached to her. They want to be a part of her. Pasuk Yutet. Ubikabetz betulot shenit. And when the betulot, the virgins, the maidens, were gathered a second time, Mordechai Yosef b'shar HaMelech, and Mordechai sat at the king's gate. So here they were gathered a second time. It says the Targum, Ahasuerus was advised to try using jealousy to prompt Esther into talking. So therefore, let's bring the virgins again. Some say the opposite. The Malbim writes that he sent the remainder home to assure Esther that she was not going to be replaced, so that if she was of lowly stock, of lowly lineage, she wouldn't be afraid to admit it. Before Ahasuerus crowned Esther, the Al-Shich writes, he looked over the remaining women one more time to confirm that none of them were as beautiful as she, and that's his interpretation of this pasuk. Mordechai sat there by the king's gate. His presence there allowed him to continue sending her encouragement to keep silent. That was his goal and his mission. You don't say a word. Some want to say, the Ibn Ezra, that he was there to keep her informed of any political developments that might affect the Jew. And last, the Midrash writes that Mordechai sitting at the gate usually meant a high position of power. That Mordechai was promoted to a position at the royal gate. From whom? From Esther's recommendation. King loves me. So, hey, king, I kind of know somebody that would be really beneficial. I think he would be a good advocate for the monarchy, and he can contribute a lot to the welfare and goodness of the country. His name is Mordecai. Okay, let's give him a seat at the Senate, so to speak, and that's where Mordecai sat. Pasuk Kaf. En Esther magedet molata et amma. Esther still told nothing of her lineage, of her birthplace and her nation. Kasher tziva alea Mordechai, just like Mordechai had instructed her. Ve'et ma'amar Mordechai Esther osa. Esther continued to obey Mordechai. Kasher hayta be'omna ito, just as when she was being raised and reared by him. Even though at this point she's the queen and she's got a lot more power than Mordechai, she maintained her piety, she maintained her humility and the loyalty to Mordechai, and therefore didn't want to reveal anything. She was still following the instructions. And arguably, one of the most important parts of this Megillah takes place in the last 3 verses of this Perek. By Yamim, and it was on those days, Pasuk Kaf Aleph, Mordechai Yoshe B'Shar HaMelech, when Mordechai was sitting by the king's gate, Katzaf, Bigtan Vateresh, Bigtan and Teresh became enraged. These were 2 of the king's chamberlains, of the guardians of the threshold, guards. And they wanted to send their hand, in other words, to assassinate King Ahasuerus. The Malbim writes that the reason why they were angry was because they were unhappy with Mordechai's promotion. They themselves wanted to be promoted, and they didn't understand why the king chose him over them, and therefore they wanted to assassinate the king. Rashi says they wanted to assassinate him with poison. Leashkoto sam hamavet. Rashi's quoting the Gemara, to give him poison to kill him. Pasuk Kabet. Vayivada hadavar leMordechai. The matter became known to Mordechai by Megilat Esther Amalka, who told it to Queen Esther. Vatomer Esther Melech b'Shem Mordechai, and Esther informed the king in Mordechai's name. Mordechai learned of the matter. How? Says the Targum, by prophecy. This was essential into the salvation of the Jewish people. Some want to say, Rashi quotes a Gemara, that Bigtan Vateresh discussed their plans in the Tursi language, assuming that no one else would understand them. It's a private language that they knew. But Mordechai, being the member of the Sanhedrin, was fluent in 70 languages, and that's why he was able to understand their plot against the king. And the last pasuk, Vayvukash hadavar vayimatzeh. Pasuk Kav Gimel, the matter was investigated, and it was found to be true. Vayitalu shenehem al etz. They were both hanged on the gallows. Vayikatev besefer divrei yamim lifnei hamelech, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the king's presence. So first of all, the Malbim says what was found to be true. They found poison that they were going to administer to Ahasuerus, and it was recorded in the book of King's Chronicles. Hashem always readies the cure before sending the illness. Kadosh Baruch Hu is known that before the mahala is brought, there's always a refuah. So before threatening the Jews with annihilation through Haman, as we're going to be seeing next Perek, he arranged for them to have someone already on the throne, and for the king to be indebted to Mordechai for life. It is from this little episode where we learn in Pirkei Avot one of the 48 ways to acquire Torah. The last idea mentioned in the Mishnah is this idea of Kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro mevi geula la'olam, that anybody who says something in the name of who he heard it from brings geula to the world. Shneimar vatomer Esther lamelech b'shem Mordechai, quoting this pasuk that was said in the name Mordechai. So I saw a very interesting idea in the in the book of Raval. But first, I before I get to that, the Targum says that Esther didn't only say the information in Mordechai's name, but demanded that it be written down. This was something that she wanted Ahasuerus to do. Now Mordechai didn't want Esther to mention his name at all. You know, he foresaw that Esther was going to play a pivotal role in the salvation of Am Yisrael and bring about the redemption of Jewish people. And it's the Jewish people's best interest to have Esther receive all the credit for foiling the assassination. In fact, I saw written in the name of the Chatam Sof, the Imre Emet, actually, that she had herself heard through prophecy, through Ruach HaKodesh, of Bigtan and Teresh's plot to assassinate Ahasuerus, but she suppressed her own prophecy and didn't report the plot in her own name, just so that Mordechai would have the honor to be recognized as a man who saved the king's life. So Mordechai didn't want it. He wanted Esther to take all the credit. Esther couldn't come to terms to take the credit. Her modesty, her righteousness, it just wouldn't allow her to do such a thing. So she insisted that this whole little story be written in the king's ledger, that the information that saved his life was forwarded by Mordechai HaYehudi. And this is where we get the idea of Kol Ha'omer Davar B'Shem Oro Mevi Geula Le'olam. We see from here that as long as a person seeks to do what is right, not only will no harm befall that person, but he will actually gain. Esther's decision became the critical turning point in the unfolding of the miracles that we're going to follow. In fact, in the beginning in Pasuk in Perek Vav, which we will get to shortly, of course, the sleep eluded the king because he was very troubled by Esther's insistence that Haman attend the next day's feast. As we're going to learn, Ahasuerus suspected Esther to have developed a certain fondness with Haman, and the two of them intended to assassinate him. And so the Chachamim explain that Ahasuerus thought to himself, if indeed there's a plot against me, surely one of my subjects will reveal it to me. But maybe the reason why no loyal servant has come forward to uncover the plot is because I didn't reward him sufficiently for something that he did. So he brought back the Divrei Hayamim, he brought back all of these chronicles to be reviewed, and lo and behold, he saw that Mordechai saved his life, and he was yet to be rewarded. So at this point, Haman unsuspectedly appeared in the king's court, and from that moment we know the rest is history. Haman falls. Now, had Esther listened to Mordechai and taken the credit for the plot, for revealing the plot against the king, the miracle wouldn't have come in this manner. It would have revealed that Esther had saved the king's life, and not Mordechai. Ahasuerus would have had no reason to reward Mordechai whatsoever. But Akadosh Baruch Hu was destined to make this miracle destined to be this way. So Rabbi Lau has a nice little piece here, and we'll conclude with this. Why does the redemption come to the world? Mevi Geula Le'olam. Kol Davar B'Shem Omro. So you heard something from your friend, and you repeat it in your friend's name. I'm bringing Mashiach. I'm helping bring Mashiach. So something so small, such a minor matter. And he wants to explain that's the very point of it. Like every small deed, something as tiny as quoting something in the name of its author, yes, that contributes bringing the redemption. All the other 47 qualities mentioned in that Mishnah, learning with joy and humility, learning Torah Lishma for its own sake, learning to teach and to practice. Every deed, every action has some sort of meaning, and no good attribute should be thrown away or disparaged for whatever reason. You have a positive trait, something good, it's even if you consider it to be trivial, it's instrumental in acquiring the Torah. So he asks, if that's the case, then why hasn't the Geulah arrived? Why isn't Mashiach not here yet? Every single page of Talmud that you study, we find Tanaim and Amoraim quoting their rabbi and his rabbi, and Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Yochanan, Amar this, Amar 6 rabbis in a row. Everyone's quoting each other. The answer is, the world as a whole hasn't arrived at that moment, he writes. The universal redemption will come. We know that, but every individual has to do his part, whatever part it is. And just like the news of the redemption will come, it will be proclaimed by those people who reveal the truth by stating a comment in the name of a person that you heard it from. That's something that's emet. Therefore, the redemption of Bnei Israel through Purim miracle came about Esther HaMalka, because she spoke to the king in the name of Mordechai. That's what the Maharal explains. The Maharal writes that that's a connection between quoting something in the name of its author and the Geulah in the deeper sense. What's the purpose of the Geulah? The purpose of the Geulah is to reveal truth, to reveal that Kadosh Baruch Hu is emet. The world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, so that everyone know that Hashem created the world and guides the world. So when a person quotes in the name of his author, or person that of its author where he heard it from. So he performs a deed very much similar to the redemption. He reveals the truth, the source of his words. Therefore, he is worthy of bringing the redemption more quickly and hastening it, because with those deeds, he brings the what we long for, and that is exactly what Esther did, and that's why the Tanaim in this Mishnah learn it from Esther and Mordechai. She could have done it. She could have just taken all the credit, which a lot of people would love to do in normal circumstances. I saved the king's life. Who doesn't want their name forever told that this person saved the king's life? But she understood the consequences and what was at stake, and she said, I'm going to put it into Mordechai. I know this is what happened. I know this is true. And when there's truth, there is Geulah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. I hope you can join us next Wednesday, Be'ezrat Hashem, as we continue our study on Megilat Esther. We will be learning the 3rd and 4th chapter, Yimir Hashem. Wishing everybody a wonderful night. Be well.